Welcome, Iara Lee, and thank you for joining us here. Greetings on behalf of the World Village Radio and our show, Kauniit ja Mielettömät. You are a film producer and director and the founder of Cultures of Resistance Network Foundation. And you recently put up almost all of your films for free on YouTube and Vimeo. And I've been watching some of them, and what kind of boggles my mind is how diverse your topics are. There's everything from mountain climbing to Chernobyl to the farmers in Burkina Faso. And what I've been wondering is, how do you find the stories that you want to tell?
It's all about life serendipity, and life is this kind of diverse journey, and you meet all these diverse people. So I go around the world making connections and bridges about all these issues that surround us. And I truly believe that we are one world, we are, like your festival says, a village. And I think it's important to show these connections. So sometimes you're like, what is this related to that? But at the end, and even the foundation that we have a Cultures of Resistance Foundation, and people are like, oh, it's about the women, it's about the children, it's about ecology. And I'm like, no, it's about everything, So we support ecology through the foundation. We support children's rights. We support human rights. And it's kind of creating a network. And we work with a lot of people who are dedicated on specific things. But we ourselves, we kind of make bridges.
Yes. Also, one of the common themes that I noticed in a lot of the films is how you bring up the meaning of arts and artists as tools of resistance. And in your documentaries, you also often interview many local artists and poets. And since you yourself are a filmmaker, where do you see your role in resistance and the role of artists in general?
Yeah, because I used to run a film festival in Sao Paulo, Brazil in the 80s. So I come from the arts and culture world. But as I evolved, I realized that we just could not afford to just stay with the arts and culture. We had to use that for something beyond arts and culture. So I started to, using that to engage about bigger issues, human rights, children's rights, ecology, all these that I mentioned, because the world is like, it's climate change. It's like this tsunami, this climate change. The world is now this virus, this pandemic. The world is about, sea rising and indigenous rights being, completely not protected. And there is so much going on that we have to use every tool we have available to make baby steps towards, positive change. And through music, photography, dance, poetry, film, I think we can move hearts and minds, and I think it's a beautiful way to really reach people, because if you are dry like a political analyst, or if you write something very like world affairs and technical and analytical, it will be harder to use that to reach people, but if you have a powerful photo or a powerful song, you can really move masses. Obviously, we make films that are grassroots, so we are not like dealing with mainstream audience, but I still think it's very, very effective tool for positive change.
Indeed it is. Do you yourself see yourself as an artist?
Yeah, I think I'm an activist before I'm an artist, but I use everything that relates to art for this activism. And I feel myself as an orchestrator of artists, because when you're a filmmaker that makes kind of collage films like my films with so many hundreds of contributors, it's almost like running an army. I'm like the general, or I would say the orchestra conductor, because the violin is the piano, is the saxophone. And so it's about making this orchestra work in harmony, So I'm so grateful to hundreds of people who work with me, because a lot of times it's just incredible talent, and I try to engage a lot of local talents, you know. So when you mentioned that I make films in Burkina Faso, Solomon Islands, or the Kalash Valley in Pakistan, or I'm very proud to say that I also always hire local camera people, the camera department, editors. So I also try to create these bridges in the film communities. And I think it's very important to be able to, engage people from on the ground, so it's not like foreigners making films about issues, but having locals help me make these films so they are very genuine and real, So it's been an amazing process. Tiresome, but amazing.
Yes. You do often tell stories that usually are kind of go unnoticed here in the Western world. But these stories are very important and they are part of our reality. Do you see yourself as someone who's trying to open the eyes of the public for these issues?
Yeah, because, as an independent filmmaker, I shoot as my duty to bring stories that are completely off the radar because, I'm not a mainstream media person. I'm not interested in the things that are already in the headline news. But I find fascinating that there are some amazing issues going on that even with all this technology and internet and social media are still kind of off the radar. And also trying to always bring perspectives that are a little unusual, because like you mentioned, Burkina Faso, a lot of people have not even heard about it. They don't even know it's the name of a country in West Africa, and to hear that the people there made revolution, like a popular revolution, with the power of the people, not with guns, not with violence, and they were able to, withdraw president, like chase him out through the unison of the people. It was a beautiful historical moment of that country, And when I was in Pakistan, I got to visit these beautiful indigenous people, the Kalash. And I was like, wow, these indigenous people all over the world, they're under the same kind of pressure, And in fact, I'm actually in the process now of editing a film about the Sami people. So I was in your country, I was in many countries in northern, Scandinavia, and then I even went to Russia because even within the Sami, I've noticed that the Norwegian Sami and the Samis from your country, the Swedish Sami, they don't know much about the Russian Sami, So here I am again, kind of making the connections and trying to say, wow, the Sami is from this area, the Sapmi, the northern Scandinavian Russia. So this is the film I'll be bringing to you guys next.
That's interesting. Obviously, your timetables are probably a little messed up right now because of the situation in the world. But how is this documentary coming along now?
Well, we just launched a Chernobyl film, so Sam is like in the back burner, the editor is like, okay. Because we are very like multi-pronged. We have actually few films in post-production, and I almost feel like I'm not a filmmaker. I'm a little factory of resistance filmmaking. And we are just coming out of this launch. We had 100 cities confirmed for this UN designated International Remembrance Day of Chernobyl, and everything got canceled. So we had to like scramble and be like, oh, what do we do now? But our philosophy is to always turn negatives into positives and use creativity to overcome obstacles. So we said, okay, let's just launch online, and in solidarity to all these things that everybody's going through, where everybody's locked up at home and have to stay in self-isolation. I said, okay, let's make everything available in solidarity, online for free, so people can, watch and educate themselves and be inspired and hopefully become more proactive from the comfort of their home. Let's get them going, And at the end of the day, it was a very perfect situation because we had over 15,000 people watch the premiere of the film, and I don't think I would be able to accomplish that in physical venues, And then we had this Q&A on the Remembrance Day, which was just Sunday. And we had like 500 people sign up for the Q&A. I was like, wow, we could not do that on a venue. And we had guests from Bahrain, Ukraine, Russia, US, and, Brazil, me, and Slovakia. That is also amazing because we could not make a Q&A with people so international if we were in a physical venue. So I think in a way, there are a lot of things going on with this pandemic, and we are creating lots of paradigm shifts, not only in film distribution style, but I think there are a lot of lessons to be learned. I mean, we've seen all this headline news about wildlife, sleeping on the highway because there is no human presence. And all of a sudden it's like the flip side, animals are observing us caged while we were caging them when we were free, So it just makes us think about, how were we living? Was this normal, something that we should go back to? Because maybe that normal was the problem, and we don't want to go back to that normal. We have to use this as a big lesson about how are we conducting our lives in this high speed overconsumption, and creating all this pollution. I mean, you saw all these photographs of, for the first time, India gets to see, the mountains from Delhi, and, the Himalayas becomes visible for the first time. And we have so many things going on, bizarre things, byproduct of this pandemic. And I think we should use that as philosophical lessons. The same thing with Chernobyl, when they had this nuclear power going on, was this utopia place, and then we had this meltdown. And now we have this like tourist paradise in Chernobyl, people going for post-apocalypse tourism. And it's just like the world is so bizarre. People go to Chernobyl because they want to be in the forest and see wildlife and go hiking. That's why they go to Chernobyl now. I mean, obviously we had these horrible fights. That was just horrendous. It was the biggest fire since the meltdown in '86. So that was like another wake-up call that, we can't take it for granted. We have to really be careful because the radiation level with the fire increases quite a bit. And so everything is fragile, everything is questionable, but everything is surreal. Life is very surreal.
Yeah, it certainly is. And that's one of the things that I've been wondering. Do you think that it really is, should we go back to that normal? Because it feels like economists are talking about how we should lift the restrictions soon. The economy is suffering and the economy is collapsing, but the only thing that's really happening is that people are not spending as much as they used to. They're only spending for the essentials mainly, and that's the reason that the economy is collapsing. We have known for a long time that this kind of system cannot be sustainable. Could this really be a wake-up call?
I know. I really hope that we question this normalcy, because this is actually the problem. And I think what you said is totally right. Why do we need to be so over-consuming? We realize that if we have basic needs, we can also have a life, So it's something that we all should question and know, and create some sort of baby steps towards paradigm shift. And I think this has been an incredible journey into something that could become much better, And I think, apropos, the title of the upcoming film that I shot in Lesotho, From Trash to Treasure, How to Turn Negatives into Positives, is applicable to our situation too, We had this negative virus, but if we are intelligent and smart, we'll draw a lot of lessons from it, and hopefully we'll start a better future. And this is what I'm hoping for, So the solidarity, and the compassion that we realize that we have to have, that it has to be universal for all of us to continue existing as a human species. And, how maybe, having clean air is more important than all these factories churning excessive product that we don't even need, you know? But I don't know, at the same time, I feel like, oh my God, this capitalism is so ingrained that maybe after we go back, you know, post pandemic, the capitalism will go overdrive to compensate the money lost, you know. So we need all the energy from citizens of the world to say, no, this is not what we want to go back to, and really make baby steps toward a new system, a system change. Yeah, because what we need is systemic change. It's not even just little things here and there. It's a full, you know, overhaul of the system.
Yeah, but what can the ordinary people, the small people, do for that change? Is there anything that we can do, or does the change?
Yeah,
Where does it?
I think we have to be, instead of going forward in this high speed consumption, we have to retract. And all of us realize that it doesn't hurt us, you know, if we buy less, if we consume less, if we drive less, if we create less pollution. So if all of us could make those steps, because it's gonna take all of us, you know, and change does not come from politicians. You can have, you know, the Democrats or the Republicans in the US, it's all gonna be the same, you know, it's about the people. So I'm always about, you know, like I made this film in Syria, you know, it's called When Elephants Fight, the Grass Suffers, you know, because when we have all these politicians fighting and countries with the proxy war, the people who suffer are the grass, you know, they are, you know, this is an African proverb, you know, when elephants fight, the grass suffers. And I make films about the grass. I make films about people who have nothing to do with these big, you know, corporations, and they become completely like victim of situations they haven't created. So we really need a popular movement to create change, because we are the grass, you know, and we are the ones that have to create this from bottom up. So I encourage people to all make personal changes in their daily lives in order for us to create a systemic change.
Yes. One thing that I've also noticed now with the coronavirus, which kind of feels like this accelerated, sudden crisis that's concerning the whole world, is how polarized the reaction has been, both on the grassroots level and the systemic level. One of the things that had worried me previous to this, and still does, is, for example, the rise of the far right and outright fascism in many parts of the world, even in Europe. And now that this corona crisis has kind of come over, it has suppressed some of that fascist movement, that far right movement, because they don't really have the tools to handle this kind of situation, this kind of crisis. They don't have anything to offer for the community, because they want to direct their energy towards hate and exclusivity. But where do you see the role of governments in this systemic handling of coronavirus?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen very different reactions across the board. I mean, I'm from Brazil, and the president went on screen saying, this is just a cold, and if you are athletic like me, you will overcome. So let's go back to business. If you're young, you will survive. And then we have, you know, the US politicians saying, oh, the grandchildren, you know, the grandparents said they are ready to die, so the grandchildren won't have economic, you know, hardship. And I was just like, wow. There's so many crazy stories coming out of this corona, you know. And then we had the nannies doing this movement, says no. You know, we also have the rights to live, you know. And so I think what we need is a lot of compassion and a lot of like focus on addressing people, because we have governments that are basically trying to address corporations. Like the bailout, you know, in the US is not like money to help with the people who are making ends meet, but to get these big corporations bailout. It's just an absurd. Why does the CEO needs to keep receiving this huge salary because he had issues during Corona time? No, this money should trickle down to the ones who really need the basics covered. And even like the situation of all the workers, a lot of times we say, oh, the heroes, the essential workers. But the essential workers, in a way, they're a victim. They would like to be self-isolating like us and be protected from the virus. But they have so little, ability to be doing that. So they are in the supermarkets and the drugstores and collecting garbage and keeping the system going. So all of us, the middle class and the upper class, can be self-isolating and be comfortable. So there are a lot of things that we have to question. And at the end of the day, we have to push these politicians to think about the people and not about the corporations, which is the most important. And we are seeing across the board, situations like we saw in India when the Indian government says suddenly and abruptly, everybody has to self-isolate. I saw these buildings in India. It was not self-isolation. It was like socializing. It was like socializing, because they are so overpopulated. They have so little space. They live like 10 families in a small place. And it was just like a catastrophe in the sense that the government instituted this self-isolation without any preparation, to handle. So the whole thing is just going like, wow, and I think all the citizens of the world have to push the politicians to think of them, of people, and not about the big guys that are always unjustly getting to become millionaires and billionaires, because this is also addressing the issue of the inequality of the world. Too many billionaires, too few billionaires, and too many 99%, as we say.
Yeah, that's also one of the things that I wondered is this system really as fragile as we are told? Because we should have like more resources than ever. There should be more money around than ever, and we have more knowledge than ever. And yet now the economists and some politicians are telling us that this whole system is collapsing because people have stopped consuming as much. How can we even justify maintaining this kind of system if it really is this fragile?
Exactly, right? I mean, people in the US, they're using plastic bags. The nurses don't even have, equipment to protect themselves. They have to wear plastic bags. I mean, this is the wealthiest country in the world, and this is the situation that the capitalist is able to provide in times of crisis. So exactly what you said is showing that it's not a good system. So we have to really, really come up with new ideas, and this could be used as a catalyst for positive change. But if we don't allow, I'm afraid we will go on the hyper capitalism after we come out of this, which is definitely what we don't want. We want to be able to protect the wildlife, and we have climate change. This is like a huge thing that is engulfing us all. So we cannot afford, to have people under situations of so precarious situations. We have big issues to deal with, and this is proving the system is not equipped. So we have to change the system. It's quite obvious to me, but will all of us together do that? It will take, the billions of us.
Yeah, do you think part of the problem might be that these problems that we are facing and that we are going to face, for example, with the climate change, that they are just too big? People don't really understand them.
Yeah, it becomes so abstract, but it's so real. I mean, I made this film in the Solomon Islands, and the film was not about climate change. It was about climate injustice, because, these people they don't even have factories. Some of these islands, they don't have cars. They don't produce any pollution. They don't produce any fossil fuels. And they are the first to get the sea rising and the huge storms. And they're the ones like sinking, these are like island states that will disappear as countries. And I was just like in this area of the world saying, wow, this is climate injustice. we the people in the US and China and Europe, we create all this climate catastrophe, which is a better terminology for climate change. And these innocent people on the, on the edge, they're the ones suffering the most and first, So I think we have this huge responsibility, turn off all these machines that create fossil fuels and find ways of cleaner energy. We must to survive, because this is going to affect the rich and the poor, just like this pandemic, This is another thing that was very eye-opening. Even if you have a lot of money in the bank, you can still get, this virus and fall ill. I mean, I'm here in Saudi Arabia. I've heard a lot of the royal family they have corona, and I hear all these movie stars and, the UK prime minister and so forth. I mean, this is just like climate catastrophe is gonna bring us all down, So let's create a system that will save us all, from the ones who are poor to the ones who are rich, because this is a global issue.
Yes, and I think I actually watched the documentary that you mentioned about the Indonesian area, and there was one quote that kind of resonated with me. It was by Patrick Rose, and he said, and I quote here, "There's been a massive increase in this sort of security in border patrols. In closing borders, and in large part this is a response to the predicted waves of refugees that we're going to see as a result of climate change, and that our governments are pulling up the drawbridge right at the moment when we should be extending the hand." And this is something that has been seen slightly also with the coronavirus, that certain parties, certain people are trying to use this crisis as a tool for hatred and xenophobia and exclusion. How can we fight against something like this?
Yeah, it started with the refugee crisis, the war refugee crisis, and this is another thing. You cannot stop climate change building walls, and building more military frontiers and borders. This has to be addressed through solidarity, because this is not something that you can isolate yourself. Oh, we are rich, we are going to build this, military border, so all these millions of people from Africa fleeing climate change cannot enter. This is not going to work. We have to create a system of compassion and solidarity, global solidarity, and that's why I make films in different corners of the world, to show that we are all united, And I think this quote that you just read is the most important line we have in our film, This is the time to extend the table so we can all eat together, and not the time to kind of create this bridge and draw it, and not allow people who need. And in fact, all these European wealthy countries were freaking out with war refugees, and this is nothing compared to the climate refugees we're going to have. The numbers will be so much higher, and there is no way we can. I mean, what are we going to do when millions of people need to flee from a continent, from Bangladesh? We cannot just let them all die. I mean, but this is so crazy, we are in this situation where humans lost humanity. And I think this is the most important thing that we have to promote, to regain humanity and to really see the other as our brothers and sisters, so we can all coexist and survive as a species. So inshallah, some of these leaders and politicians running governments, some of them will have this kind of open mind that will convince this fascists and governments that are just militarizing borders. But we have to push them. The populations and the citizens of the world have to push them.
Yes, and it's important to get the message to the people as well, because there's another quote that also resonated very strongly with me. It was from the Modulations. Which, it was released in late 90s, 1998, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was in the mid-90s that I made this film about this, transition. I always like to make films about transitions,
Yeah.
Modulations was a film about how kids in Detroit and Chicago didn't have money to buy acoustic instruments. They can only they could only afford this little synthesizer. Like, and through creativity, they created this new genre of music that now everybody listens to, you know? So it's again about turning negatives into positives, how they, you know, their limited resources that didn't allow them to have fancy piano made them create music with synthesizers. And look at where we are now.
Yeah, I love that document. And as much as I would like to talk about the electronic music, especially of the 90s, I'm afraid we don't have the time for that. We would be talking here until Christmas, I feel like. But there was this quote from Alec Empire. He said that, "I think it was boredom that led to fascism in the 20s in Germany, not hate. And this is exactly what's going on at the moment. Everyone's so bored that no one wants to change anything." And
Wow.
he said this in 1998. And somehow I felt like, wait, this really brings home today as well. How do
Yeah.
you feel about this?
What's gonna kill us all is not even the bad guys, it's the apathetic ones, you know, the people who just don't care, the people who are just passive, the people who are bored. And this is actually the most detrimental, you know, because, and this is also very global, and this is something that we have to shake, you know, because people are just so bored, so apathetic. Apathy is the worst, even more than the proactive evil. Is the apathy that we have. And here is a world that has so much going on, and we still have a vast majority of the population completely, like, you know, absent. So it's gonna take a lot of like excitement to get people fired up, you know, and we have to create these instruments. That's why I try to make my little films, try to like shake people, you know, get them out of the boredom, get them out of the apathy. And we should all do that with music, photography, dance, and inspire people, because people are just sitting around. And we can't afford to sit around. We have to get very proactive. We can't even just be inspired. We can't just be informed. We can't even just be educated. We have to get action on the ground, you know? So Alec Empire was right. We got to really get people moving.
Yeah. How do you feel like we can best reach people to wake them up?
Well, it takes baby steps, and sometimes it takes time, you know. I mean, I'm very humble with my films. For example, I feel like I'm planting little seeds that maybe is very intangible. Maybe the product of that will be a generation down the road. But the problem is that we can't afford to wait too long, you know. This is the problem also, because as much as I want to be patient and nurturing and, you know, resilient, it's not the time that we can afford to just be very slow motion about addressing the tsunami issues that are like coming in very high speed, you know, the negative forces. So it's something that we have to engage all meanings, you know, all means to make it happen, because every single tool that you can imagine should be used. Literature and, you know, music and graphic design and calligraphy, whatever it takes, you know. So you're using journalists, and someone is going to use, you know, music, and the other is going to use some photography. And this is how we're going to make it happen. I mean, we are not going to use bombs. We're not going to use, you know, weapons. We're going to use creativity and perseverance and resilience and determination. So I hope my idealistic view of the world will, you know, permeate amongst young people, especially because I think in a way is the duty of the young. And you guys in Scandinavia produce Greta, you know, and I think I was very hopeful, because when I see young people getting very like concerned, then I feel like, wow, now there is hope. Because the older guys, they're just like, you know, sitting in their comfortable chairs. They kind of like, you know, it's all about the youth. And even me, when I make films, I try to have a style of editing and style of telling stories that will appeal to young people, you know. So if I want to make a film about nuclear energy, I will make a film about adventure in Chernobyl. So young people will come and watch it. And then at the end they'll be like, oh, but there's something beyond post-apocalypse adventure. Here's this issue that we have to address, is nuclear energy something that we should embrace because it's considered not fossil fuel, but what are we going to do with this nuclear waste, So in a way, I have to use kind of different hooks and different strategies to bring young people, and then we can get serious about some of the issues. And that has been my methodology all along, but everybody else has to get on board. Let's all work together because we're all little drops in the bucket.
Yes, and it's also one of the things that I noticed in the documentary is that the visual narrative is almost musically paced in many ways. Do you draw inspiration from media arts and especially music videos?
Yeah, I think, it's about having this kind of dynamic language, and music is so universal. It touches a person's heart. So we try to cut to music. We try to make films that move, like music, and we try to make them dynamic. So we, bypass this concept that documentaries are boring things. We try not to use a lot of talking heads, but lots of visuals, lots of music, and get young people to like come in, because it's very important to also make films that is not just addressed to people who already think like us. Sometimes when we are trying to engage audience, people in my office like, oh, this person looks so like, apathetic and not interested. Oh, this person, so, I saw this person's Facebook, it looks very right wing. And I'm like, these are the people we need. These are the people who need to see our films, not the cool guys, not the ones who already are progressive, So this is like the battle. To bring people who don't think like us to actually consider other points of view and consider other ways of telling history and other ways of seeing the world, not just as a scary person that doesn't want the poor and the refugee to come into their perfect little world. It's about bringing these people that are scared and isolated and rich and they don't want any of the dirt of the real world. But life is not like that. We have to accept that we are a community and we have to mix. It's not about the upper class with the upper class and the grassroots to the grassroots. It's about unison. So my strategy is to bring the fascists and the right wings to see our films.
You have actually produced, or at least have been involved in the production of music videos. Am I correct?
Yeah, actually, I produced this Iranian rapper when he was a kid, his first music video, and he now has like millions and millions of followers, and he's like the granddaddy of the rap in Iran, where he's completely like prohibited to even like be a rapper, a hip hop artist, And we just did another one in Malawi, and it was about the political crisis in Malawi, electoral fraud and, all these politicians, hijacking the votes and twisting things around. And that one is called Better Must Come, and the music video is about how people have to strive for better must come, is the title. And I'm actually very interested. So if you guys know of other Global South musicians who need, some volunteer filmmakers to make music videos for social change, I think it's very effective language for young people, and we want to keep doing that. Actually, we also want to do a lot of short pieces because I feel the world, consumption of information is so different nowadays. When I started, I used to make short films and people would be like, when are you going to make real films? And and I would be like, what do you mean? And they're like, feature length films. And then I made 10 feature length films. And now I feel like, oh, I better go back to still photo because people's attention span is like one click. So now we are also thinking of doing a lot of short films so then we can get people to watch, because it's very hard to get people to sit through a 1 hour, 2 hour film, So we have to adapt, we change. And hopefully, young people will like see some of this shorter version and then we get them hooked and then they go and see the longer version, get a little deeper into the issue then. But
Yeah.
it's all about strategies of communication to get this change we want to provoke.
I was about to ask if you want to produce more music videos or are you just focusing on documentaries? And one of the films that I watched was, I think it was the earliest that's on your YouTube page, An Autumn Wind, which was like a poetry video.
Yeah, that was like, one of the last interviews with Allen Ginsberg, this beatnik poet. I went to his apartment in the East Village and I was asking him to just, use his voice and read the Matsubasho haiku poems from Japan. And he was like, oh, I don't know about this translation. I got my own haiku. So he brought his haiku poems and they were very like, kind of like out of the box and very like sharp and, so it was very cool impromptu situation. And then I cut this like haiku philosophical from Japan with some hardcore Allen Ginsberg haiku. And then I shot in the beautiful temples of Kyoto in contrast, with the contemporary, poetry from Allen Ginsberg. I love juxtapositions, I love the old and the new. I love the cutting edge mixed with archival. I like, classical sounds mixed with, abstract, experimental electronic music. I think life is about juxtaposing, coexisting, accepting, mixing, and being open-minded about the different,
There's one thing that still intrigues me is how you've been all over the world. You've interviewed the child soldiers in Congo, you've been to the slums of Rio de Janeiro and all these grim places, and the Burma situation with the saffron revolution, but still you managed to find that glimmer of hope, that glimmer of peace and unity among people. Where would you say is the glimmer of hope in regarding this corona crisis, for example, or the climate change crisis?
Yeah, I think, in all these very adverse and negative situations, we always find these amazing activists and people from the grassroots movement. Sometimes a lot of anonymous people who are just doing their work quietly in the background, and we just have to kind of like sometimes put a spotlight on these amazing people. I mean, even in war circumstances, you find these courageous people, helping people they don't even know in hotspot areas of the conflict. And this has been to me very amazing to find that even if you are in this like darkness, black hole, there are always glimmers of hope. And this is what I try to bring, because to talk about negativity, this is like headline news every day. This is what the mainstream media does, but we're not going to solve problems just denouncing and just showing the negative. We're going to solve problems bringing the grassroots to work together and get action. So I go around the world looking for these people, and looking for the ones that are selfless, that think big picture, that think global, but sometimes act local because this is the right thing to do. And I think this is the same thing with this pandemic. We are finding a lot of people who are very incredible, very solidarity based, and this is the way for us to create these links. I mean, look at all these nurses and these people working for us, and the minimum they say is like stay home just to reduce the contagion while we stay here working, and that is just like incredible. And I think we should really like give this spotlight to all the people working and to make this difference. And as I said before, it's not about the top, it's about the grassroots and working from the bottom up. And since this is affecting us, all the billions of people on this planet, so all these billions of people on the planet should be the ones that will act to provoke the change we want to see. Like, we cannot transfer the responsibility. It's not like, oh, this is the job of the government, this is the job for leaders. No, this is our job. This is our job as global citizens.
Yes, and one more thing that I would like to ask is that we are living in strange times and in many ways scary times, like with the aforementioned climate change and everything. And sometimes it might feel like that it's just overwhelming, that these problems are too big and that there's really no hope. But what would you like to say to people who have kind of lost their hope and who have fallen into that apathy and despair?
Well, especially when people put children, in this world, they have this big responsibility. To be hopeless is not even an option. People always ask me, Yara, you go to the worst places in the world and you're always smiling, you're always full of hope. And I'm like, because there is no other option. You have to engage, you have to be proactive, you have to smile and be like, So people, don't stay home and frozen. We all can do tiny bit. We cannot do huge, but if we all do a little, things will change. And then, the offspring that you guys put in this world will have a better future. So it's not even thinking about us, our generation. It's about thinking about the next generations, and the responsibility we have to make them inherit something that is not so catastrophic. So, hope is the only option. And baby steps. I know sometimes we get like overwhelmed. It's like, oh, maybe there is no hope. This is just a black hole. But we can't. We have to keep on going. Even if we don't manage, even if we self-destroy as a species, we have to still keep on going until the very last drop of air that we can breathe.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anything else you would like to say to the listeners and watchers of our show?
Well, donate your time, donate your music, donate your love, donate your skills. Use all you have within your capacity to make those changes. Don't delegate. Don't pass the responsibility. We all have to do it. Global citizenship. That's what it is. And with a lot of smiles, and a lot of like hope and, in a positive way, despite the fact that the tsunami is negative.